My daughter-in-law said it the way you say something you've rehearsed in the car on the way over, casual but too smooth, like she'd practiced the landing. We just figured you'd be more comfortable at home, Margaret. Hawaii's a lot, the heat, the excursions, keeping up with the kids. She smiled when she said it. That was the part that stayed with me. The smile, like she'd done me a favor. My son was standing 2 feet behind her. He looked at the floor. I nodded. I said, "Of course, don't worry about me." The hydrangeas were blooming early. I'd planted them the spring after my husband Robert passed. That was 8 years ago. 8 years of keeping this house, feeding the grandchildren when they visited, showing up for every school play and soccer game and birthday party with the right gift, the right cake, the right amount of invisible. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the family group chat on my phone. There, it was a full itinerary. 7 nights, 2 connecting rooms, luau dinner on Thursday, snorkel excursion Friday, spa day for Christine and the girls. My grandchildren's names were in the message. Sophie, Lily, and little Eli. Everyone accounted for. Everyone except me. I put the phone face down on the table. I didn't cry. I was 67 years old, and I had done my crying in the right places at the right times, and this, whatever this was, sat somewhere below tears. It was a different kind of ache, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that's been building so quietly for so long that when you finally feel it, you realize it was never new. It was always there. I made chamomile tea and sat in Robert's chair by the window. He had a way of looking at me, Robert did. Not through me, not past me, at me, like I was the whole room. He'd been gone 8 years and I still reached for him sometimes in the dark, still set 2 cups out of habit, still laughed at things and then turned to say, "Did you hear that?" To no one. I thought about what he would have said. He would have said, "So go anyway." It took me 3 days. I didn't tell anyone. I opened my laptop on a Sunday night while a rainstorm hit the windows, and I looked at flights from Portland to Tokyo. I'd always wanted to Japan, not in a dream board way, in the way you want something so quietly for so long that you stop saying it out loud because it starts to feel embarrassing. Robert and I had talked about it once, back in our 40s, over a bottle of wine on the back porch. We'd gotten as far as looking at a map. Then something came up. Something always came up. And the conversation folded itself away like a piece of paper into a drawer. I looked at flights. 14 hours, nonstop. Portland to Tokyo. My passport was in the fire safe in the bedroom closet, still valid. I'd renewed it 4 years ago, out of some stubborn refusal to stop being the kind of person who had a current passport. I retrieved it, sat back down at the kitchen table, and placed it beside the laptop. The cursor hovered. I thought about Christine's smile. The practiced one. I booked the flight. Economy, window seat, departing in 11 days. Then, I booked a small hotel in the Shinjuku neighborhood of Tokyo that the reviews described as clean, quiet, and run by a family who spoke some English. 3 nights there, then a bullet train to Kyoto, 4 more nights in a guest house near the Philosopher's Path, then Hiroshima, then Osaka, and home. 17 days. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet kitchen. The rain had softened to a drizzle. The refrigerator hummed. I thought about all the reasons not to go my knees, the long flight, the language barrier, the sheer fact of being a 67-year-old woman traveling alone to a country where I didn't speak a single word of the language. I cataloged every reason carefully. The way you do when you're building a case. And then I thought about Christine's smile again. I went to bed and slept better than I had in months. I didn't tell my son. I texted my neighbor, Bev, and asked if she'd take in my mail and keep an eye on the hydrangeas. She said, "Of course. You, going somewhere fun?" I said, "Just a little trip." She sent back a thumbs up. That was all the send-off I needed. Packing took me 2 hours. 1 carry-on, 1 personal bag. Comfortable walking shoes in 2 colors, 3 pairs of slacks, 4 blouses, my navy cardigan that Robert always said made my eyes look like lake water, a light rain jacket, and my journal. The same kind I'd kept since I was teaching hardcover. College ruled. The kind where the pen glides. I hadn't written in it in over a year. I also packed the reading glasses I only wore at home because Christine had once said, gently, "Oh, those are very practical, Margaret," and I'd never worn them in front of her again. At the airport, the gate agent checked my passport without ceremony, which I appreciated. I found my seat, tucked my bag overhead, and settled in. The man across the aisle was already asleep before we pushed back from the gate. A young mother 2 rows up was nursing an infant. Normal life. I was part of it. We took off into a gray Portland evening, and I watched the city lights shrink below us until there was only cloud and then nothing. Somewhere down there, my son and his family were getting ready for their trip to Hawaii. I didn't feel the pang I expected. I felt something lighter than that, something that didn't have a name yet. I slept fitfully somewhere over the Pacific, the kind of sleep that folds hours into each other. When I woke, we were descending. Through the oval window, the coast of Japan appeared in morning light, green and impossibly detailed. I thought, I'm really here. Narita Airport was large and disorienting in the way that all large airports are, but the signage was bilingual and the people were kind in the efficient, unhurried way I would come to associate with Japan entirely. I found the train into the city, watched the suburbs give way to dense urban gray, and then to the towers of Tokyo. And I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for so long I'd stopped noticing it. The hotel was exactly as described. Narrow hallway, small room, spotless. Window, overlooking a side street where a man was sweeping the sidewalk in long, careful strokes. The woman at the desk bowed slightly and called me ma'am with real courtesy. Not the pity version you sometimes get when you're older and alone, but the real kind. I put my suitcase against the wall and sat on the edge of the bed. I opened my journal to the first page. At the top I wrote, "Things I forgot I was allowed to want." Then I closed it, because I wasn't ready to fill it yet. Some pages need to earn themselves. That first evening I walked, just the block around the hotel, then a little further, following the smell of something warm from a narrow restaurant where the menu was pictures and the chef was 80 if he was a day, moving behind the counter with the total authority of a man who has done one thing beautifully his entire life. I pointed at a bowl of ramen. He nodded once. I ate it slowly, both hands around the bowl, the broth pulling heat into my fingers. No one rushed me. No one asked if I needed anything. I sat for 40 minutes and watched the street through the window and didn't look at my phone once. Nobody was waiting on an update from me. I met Vivian on my second morning, in the breakfast room of the hotel. She was at the small corner table by the window, reading a paperback novel face down on the table while she stirred her tea in circles. Silver hair cut close, reading glasses pushed up on her head, the posture of someone who had spent decades standing on her feet and now sat very deliberately when she had the chance. "You've got jam on your elbow," she said, without looking up from her tea. I checked. She was right. "Thank you." I blotted it with my napkin. "Occupational hazard of the breadbasket. Retired teacher," she said. Not a question. "How did you know?" She finally looked up. "The way you hold your coffee cup. 2 hands, like you're at a parent conference." She smiled. "I'm Vivian. Portland. Margaret. Also Portland." She blinked. "You're kidding." We laughed, which is how you begin things sometimes, unexpectedly, over jam and a shared city. She'd been a nurse for 38 years, widowed 5 years back. Her daughter lived in Seattle and had, in Vivian's words, very specific opinions about what 71-year-old women should and shouldn't attempt, which was why Vivian had booked this trip without telling her until the night before departure. She'll forgive me, Vivian said calmly, once she realizes I came back in one piece. We walked together that morning. Not by plan, just by direction. We were both heading toward the Temple District, and it seemed wasteful to walk separately. Vivian moved slowly, but noticed everything. A ceramic cat in a shop window, the pattern on a manhole cover, the way light hit the roof tiles of a shrine at a particular angle, that she stopped walking to observe for a full 30 seconds. In nursing, she said, you learn to notice details. You have to. The small things are usually the real things. I thought about that. About how many small things I'd stopped noticing because I was too busy being useful, too busy making sure everyone else's experience was smooth, too busy being background. At the shrine, I sat on a low stone bench while Vivian bought a small charm from the booth at the entrance. The courtyard was quiet. Pigeons on the eaves. A woman my age lighting incense and bowing her head with total private focus. I watched her and felt something I couldn't quite name. Not envy, more like recognition. That evening, back in my room, I opened the journal. Things I forgot I was allowed to want. I stared at the heading, then started writing. To sit in a restaurant alone without apologizing with my body language. To follow a street just to see where it goes. To say no without building a case first. To wear my good reading glasses anywhere I please. My phone showed 3 messages. One from Bev saying the hydrangeas looked happy. One from Sophie, my granddaughter 17, sharp as a tack and twice as kind as her parents gave her credit for. And one from Michael. I read Michael's first. Hey Mom, hope you're doing well. The Hawaii flights are tomorrow. I'll check in when we land. Nothing else. I put the phone down and looked at the ceiling. Then I opened Sophie's message. Grandma, I tried to call you but it went to voicemail. Mom said, you're traveling? Where? Tell me everything. I smiled. I typed back. Japan. Tokyo right now. I'll send a photo. I took a picture from my window, the narrow street below, a paper lantern outside the restaurant, a bicycle leaning against the wall with a basket full of persimmons. Not posed. She replied in 40 seconds. Grandma, that is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. How are you even there right now? I bought a ticket, I wrote. Turns out that's all it takes. She sent back a string of hearts. Then, can we talk when you get back? Like, really talk? Of course, I said. Door is always open. I closed my phone and wrote 2 more lines in the journal before I fell asleep. The bullet train to Kyoto ran so smoothly you had to watch the landscape to believe you were moving. Rice paddies, mountains, a city that appeared and disappeared. Vivian read her novel. I looked out the window and felt an uncomplicated happiness that I'd almost forgotten was possible, the kind that doesn't need to be shared to be real. Kyoto received us like it had been expecting us. The guest house was run by a woman named Keiko, who spoke careful, precise English, and showed us our rooms with a quiet formality that felt like a kind of respect. Our rooms were on the same floor, separated by a sliding screen. Vivian knocked on it on the first night, and passed through a cup of green tea and half a rice cracker. No reason, just the small language of new friendship. We spent 3 days walking. The Philosopher's Path, which deserved its name entirely, 2 kilometers along a canal lined with cherry trees, the whole thing designed to slow you down, to make you think. I walked it twice, the second time alone, early in the morning before the tourists arrived, my shoes quiet on the stones. The water beside me, making its particular sound. I thought about my son, about the years I'd structured my life around his family's rhythms, the Christmases I started shopping for in October, the dinners I made every Sunday when they lived closer, the months I'd watched the grandchildren so Christine could work, so Christine could rest, so Christine could go to a weekend retreat in Sedona that she'd talked about for 3 months and never once thought to invite me along for. I didn't think about this with bitterness. I thought about it the way you examine an old photograph, with a kind of wondering detachment. How did I get here? When did I agree to become the furniture? In the courtyard of a temple near the Arashiyama bamboo grove. I sat on a bench and took out my journal. I kept thinking if I gave enough, they'd keep me close. That's not how love works. That's how hiring works. A woman sat down at the other end of the bench. We didn't speak. We just sat in the same quiet for a while, two strangers sharing a patch of stillness. It was enough. My phone had been buzzing intermittently all week. Michael, 3 times from Hawaii, the messages getting shorter. Mom, can you pick up? Then, getting a little worried. Then, are you okay? Nothing from Christine until day 5 of Kyoto. Margaret? Michael says you're not responding. Is everything all right? I wasn't ready to respond to any of them. Not from stubbornness, I was genuinely trying to figure out what I wanted to say. I'd spent so many years saying the thing that smoothed things over, the thing that made everyone comfortable, the thing that kept the Sunday dinners from having any edges. I was done saying that thing, but I didn't yet know what to say instead. Sophie messaged every day. Small things. A drawing she'd done of 2 women walking under lanterns. A question about whether I'd eaten anything strange yet. A photo of her cat asleep in a sunbeam with the caption, "He doesn't know you're in Japan. Told him you were at the grocery store." One evening, she sent a longer message. Grandma, I don't know if you know this, but Dad's been a little weird since he found out you were traveling. Not mad, just quiet. He asked me if you'd seemed sad before you left. I said I didn't know. But I think you weren't sad. I think you were invisible. And I think you got tired of it. Am I wrong? I sat with that message for a long time. Then I called her. She answered on the first ring, her voice soft with surprise. Grandma, hi, sweetheart. You called. You made it easy to. There was a pause. The good kind. The kind that means 2 people are looking at the same thing for a moment, even from different rooms. I'm not angry at your father, I said carefully. I want you to know that. I'm not trying to punish anyone. I just needed. I stopped, looked out the guest house window at the dark garden below. I needed to remember what I felt like when I was the whole sentence. Not just the comma. She was quiet. Then, I understand that. I know you do. That's why you're the one I called. We talked for 20 minutes. Her art school applications, a boy she liked, the way her mother had started speaking to her like she was a guest in the house, which Sophie found both irritating and fascinating. I listened and asked questions and didn't offer solutions, which is a skill I'd spent 30 years teaching my students and had never quite managed with my own family. Before she hung up, she said, "Tell me when you're going to Hiroshima. I want to know what it feels like to stand there." I promised I would. Hiroshima was not what I expected, which is perhaps the only honest thing you can say about Hiroshima. I expected weight. I expected the particular heavy air of tragedy. What I found was a city that had decided, deliberately and collectively, to be alive. Green and wide and full of ordinary life, the river running through it, children on bicycles, restaurants full, but the Peace Memorial was something else. I stood at the cenotaph for a long time. Read the inscription that asks for all of the victims to rest in peace, that we will not repeat the evil. A child nearby was asking her father a question in Japanese. He answered slowly. She nodded, very serious. I thought about what it meant to absorb something rather than react to it, to just let the weight of a thing settle without immediately figuring out what to do next. I wrote Sophie a long message. About the cranes, about the river, about the way the city had rebuilt itself, not over the ruins but through them, keeping the bones of what it lost visible rather than burying them. I don't know if that's what she wanted, but it was what I had. She wrote back one sentence. You should teach, again. That made me stop walking. I hadn't taught in 6 years. I'd retired early, the year Robert was diagnosed, And then after he died, I'd simply never gone back. There didn't seem to be a path back in. And besides, the grandchildren needed me. Christine's schedule, Michael's. I was standing in the middle of a sidewalk in Hiroshima, Japan, staring at my granddaughter's message. I kept walking. Vivian and I spent our last shared night in Osaka, at a small restaurant she'd read about, in a neighborhood away from the tourists. Low tables, paper walls, a menu that required pointing, and some collaborative guesswork. We ordered too much and ate all of it. She had sake. I had cold beer. "Are you ready to go home?" she asked. I thought about it honestly, not to what it was. "No," she agreed. "But that's not what's waiting for you." "How do you know?" She looked at me over her cup. "Because you went. People who go like this don't come back the same. And once you're not the same, you stop fitting the old shape. The shape has to change too." She paused. My daughter still hasn't forgiven me for this trip, but she's started asking questions instead of issuing advisories. That's the beginning. We sat in companionable quiet for a while. The restaurant was full around us, voices overlapping, the smell of soy and charcoal and something sweet from the kitchen. "I need to call my son," I said. Vivian nodded. "Probably time. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to have it all figured out," she said. "You just have to start the sentence." Back in my room, I opened the voice memo app on my phone, held it in my hands for a long minute. Then I pressed record. "Michael, it's Mom. I know you've been worried, and I'm sorry I let that go longer than I should have. I'm in Japan. I'm safe. I'm good, actually. Better than good." I stopped, looked at the ceiling, started again. "I've been thinking about something, and I want to say it only once, so please listen carefully. I love you. That's not the question. The question is whether you see me, not the person who waters your plants and shows up with the right birthday cake and doesn't complain when she's left off the itinerary. Me. Margaret, your mother, who taught high school English for 28 years and raised you by herself for 2 years when your father was sick, and who has opinions about things and laughs at things and wants things still. I'm still in here. I've been in here the whole time." I stopped again. Not because I was done, because I wanted to make sure what came next was right. "I'm coming home in 4 days. I'd like to have coffee. Just us. Not a family dinner, not a Sunday with everyone and the grandchildren running through the kitchen. Just you and me at the table, and I want you to ask me how I'm doing and mean it. That's all." That's the whole ask. I hit send before I could revisit a single word. Then I lay down on the bed, fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me. The sounds of Osaka drifted up from the street. A scooter, someone laughing, the distant melody of a convenience store jingle. I thought about Robert, about the way he used to reach for my hand in theaters, not out of habit, but always deliberate. Like he kept choosing. I'd spent 8 years trying to maintain the shape of his absence, making myself small enough to fill the space where he used to stand, quiet enough not to take up more room than I deserved. I didn't know if I was done grieving him. I didn't think grief had a finish line, but I thought maybe I'd been confusing grief with disappearing, and those were not the same thing. The reply came at 2 a.m., my time, which meant Michael had sent it the same afternoon, sitting somewhere in the house, or maybe in the driveway where he used to call me from when things were hard and he didn't want Christine to hear. He'd sent a voice memo back. I sat up in the dark hotel room and listened. His voice was careful, tired, a little younger sounding than usual, the way grown children sound when they've been crying. "Mom, I heard everything you said. I've been sitting with it for a few hours because I didn't want to respond until I was sure I was being honest and not just defensive." A pause. Breath. "You're right. I stopped seeing you." I don't have a good explanation. It happened slowly enough that I told myself it wasn't happening. Christine and I talked tonight. A real conversation. The kind we don't have enough of anymore. She said something I should have said a long time ago. Another pause. We're sorry. And I know that's not enough by itself. I know the word sorry doesn't fix what it took for you to book a flight to Japan alone to remind yourself that you existed, but I want you to know I heard you. And the coffee sounds, it sounds like a start. I'll be there. I listened to it twice. Then I opened my journal. Things I know now that I didn't know when I left. Silence chosen is different from silence swallowed. A city that was broken and rebuilt can still be beautiful without hiding what happened to it. Some things require an ocean between you to be said at full volume. You don't have to explain yourself to the people who never asked. Sophie, siehst me. Robert would have gone to Japan. I closed the journal and finally slept. Vivian and I said goodbye at Kansai Airport with the particular brevity of people who know they've already said the important things. She was flying back through Seattle, stopping to see her daughter, who had in fact called twice during our Osaka dinner and asked increasingly specific questions about Vivian's dietary habits, which Vivian had answered with the patience of a woman who had spent 4 decades managing difficult patients. "Come to Portland sometime," I said. "I have friends there," she said. "I'll call." We hugged once, firmly, without ceremony. She disappeared through security without looking back, and I stood there feeling both alone and entirely all right about it. The flight home was long and quiet. I watched one movie, ate both the cookie and the crackers from my snack bag, and wrote 4 more pages in the journal. Not heavy things, light things. The color of light through a bamboo grove at 7 in the morning. The sound of a train moving through the mountains. The taste of miso soup when someone has made it with real care and no rush. The specific face Vivian made when she was thinking hard, like she was reading something in small print. The small things. The real things. Portland appeared below us in the gray November light, exactly where I'd left it, looking slightly smaller than I remembered. Nobody was at the gate. I hadn't told anyone the flight details. I took a cab home, watched the familiar streets move past the window, and felt the strange double exposure of 2 places living in the same eyes. That temple courtyard. This intersection where I'd bought Christmas trees for 30 years. Both real, both mine. The house was as I'd left it. Bev had done more than just mail and hydrangeas. She'd left a pot of soup in the refrigerator with a sticky note that said, "Welcome home, traveler." I stood in the kitchen and read it 3 times. I unpacked slowly, placed my journal on the nightstand, put the good reading glasses on the bathroom counter where I'd see them every morning, hung up the navy cardigan. In the living room, I set out the small things. I'd brought back a ceramic dish from Kyoto, 2 postcards, a folded paper crane. A woman had pressed into my hands at the Hiroshima memorial for no reason at all, just given it to me as I stood looking and walked away. I placed them on the mantel beside Robert's photograph. "I went," I told him. Sophie came over the next afternoon without calling ahead. She knocked once and then let herself in, which was her habit since she was small, and which I had always loved. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen in her paint-stained jacket and her too large backpack and looked at me like she was checking for cracks. "You look different," she said. "Good different or concerning different? Like you remembered something important." She came in and dropped her bag and sat at the kitchen table while I made tea, and we talked for 2 hours about Japan, about Vivian, about the bamboo grove and the peace memorial and the ramen at the restaurant where the old man moved like a person who knew his purpose. She asked real questions, the kind where you can tell someone has been saving them. At one point, she reached into her bag and took out a sketch pad. She'd drawn something me, she said, from the photo I'd sent. Woman at a guest house window, one hand on the frame, looking out. At the bottom, she'd written, "She went anyway." I kept my face still, but it was a close thing. Your father and I are having coffee this week, I said. She nodded. I know, he told me. A pause. He's nervous. He should be, I said, not unkindly. Nervous is honest. Nervous means it matters. She looked at me steadily. Are you going to be okay? The two of you? I don't know yet. I think we'll find out. I wrapped both hands around my teacup. Some things take time to rebuild. The important thing is whether both people want to build them. Do you? I thought about it genuinely. About Michael at 7 years old, bringing me a coffee can lid he'd painted gold, telling me it was a medal because I was the best mom. About Michael at 42, standing 2 feet behind his wife while she smiled her rehearsed smile. About Michael's voice at 2 in the morning, tired and honest and trying. Yes, I said, with conditions. Sophie smiled. Good. I laughed, surprised by it. She laughed too. Before she left, she stood in the doorway and said, I'm applying to the art program in Chicago. I looked at her. Mom doesn't know yet, she said, but I wanted to tell you first. You should go, I said. Even though it's far? Because it's far. That's the whole point. Her face did something complicated and then resolved into something clear. I knew you'd say that. Don't wait for permission, I said. Trust me. You'll miss so many things waiting. She left, and the house was quiet, and I stood at the kitchen window looking at the hydrangeas in the fading afternoon light. They were past their peak now, the blooms browning at the edges, the way things do when their season finishes. Next spring, they'd come back. They always did. Robert had planted them knowing he wouldn't see many more. He planted them anyway. Coffee with Michael was on a Wednesday. He arrived exactly on time, which told me he'd been sitting in the car for 5 minutes, not arriving too early. I knew his habits. I'd built his habits. He came in and sat at the kitchen table like it was sacred ground, which made me think he'd been practicing how to enter a room. His face was tired and open. He looked like my son. He looked like himself, really, possibly for the first time in years, without the performance of competence that Christine and their life together seemed to require of him, without the layer of efficiency. We sat with coffee for a while before either of us said anything of weight. He asked about Japan. I told him things. The ramen, the peace memorial, Vivian and her reading glasses, and her certainty, the train through the mountains. He listened, actually listened. His eyes didn't drift. He didn't pick up his phone. When I paused, he waited to see if I was done, not filling the space out of discomfort. You sound happy, he finally said. Different. I am. I looked at him. I'd like to stay that way. He nodded. Michael, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it the way it's meant, which is not as an accusation. I set my cup down. I disappeared. Not all at once, but gradually, over years. I kept myself small because it made things easier for everyone, and because, honestly, I got out of the habit of taking up space. I paused. That wasn't entirely your doing. Some of it was just time and grief, and the particular way women of my generation were taught to measure our worth in usefulness. I looked at him clearly. But some of it was you. Some of it was Christine. And I need you to understand that I won't go back to that shape. He held my gaze. I know. And I need you to understand that my coming to Sunday dinners or being included in family trips or being asked how I'm doing, those aren't me asking for charity. Those are me asking to be treated like a person who matters to the family, not a service. A person. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, When you sent that voice memo, I played it 3 times. Christine was in the other room. I think she could hear it from there. He looked at his hands. I kept thinking, I've heard that voice every day of my life, and I don't know the last time I actually listened to it. I didn't say anything. Some things deserve room. I'm not asking you to pretend none of it happened, he said. I want to try. I want to learn how to do this differently. That's all I wanted, I said. That's the entire ask. Show up and learn. He looked up. Okay, I said. I poured more coffee. He didn't leave for another 2 hours. We talked about things we hadn't talked about in years, his work, which he didn't love anymore and had been afraid to admit. A trip he and Christine had been fighting about for months. His memory of the year I almost left teaching. The year Robert got sick. How he'd been 17 and hadn't understood until much later what that year had cost me. Before he left, he stopped at the front door. Christine asked if she could come next time. Not to make it a family event. She wants to sit down with you. One-on-one. I considered that. Tell her. I'll think about it. He nodded. Fair. Then, Sophie told me she applied to Chicago. Did she? I think she got the idea from you. Good ideas travel, I said. He smiled. A real one this time. Unperformed. He looked like my son again. Like the boy who brought me a painted coffee lid and said I was the best. See you Sunday? He asked. Maybe, I said. I'll let you know. He laughed, surprised. After he left, I went to the mantel and stood for a moment in front of Robert's photograph and the paper crane and the small Kyoto dish and all the evidence of a life that was still, at 67, ongoing. Then I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and opened my journal to the last page I'd written on. I added one more line. I spent too many years apologizing for taking up space. I'm done apologizing. I'm done shrinking. I'm done being the footnote in someone else's chapter. I paused, tapped the pen against the page. I'm the whole story. I always was. I just forgot to keep writing. Outside, the hydrangeas shook once in a late autumn wind. The street was quiet. Somewhere down the block, a child was calling someone's name, life doing what it does, persisting. Without permission, without apology, moving forward on its own particular terms. I made my tea and sat in Robert's chair and looked out at all of it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not because I had arrived somewhere, but because I had decided to keep going.